We really can't believe it. Has it really reached the stage that the baby of the Clancy clan is 80 years of age? We all demand a recount, for it cannot be the truth, unless Finola has been drinking from the font of eternal youth. Well, what can we say of Finola, this woman, this wife, this mother? Well, let's not dilly-dally, for at 80 years, we've a lot of ground to cover. Now, let's start with the very place where it did begin. Born to John and Alice Clancy in Ballycashin near Corofin. The youngest of 14 children. Back then it was quite the fashion. Her birthplace, when you think of it, should have been known as Ballypassion. It all began in the year of 41 on October's 30th day, when the child christened Alice Finola first ever came our way. Of course, her mother's name was Alice, but with so many kids already, she simply forgot her own name when naming the new baby. So the babe became known as Finola. That's how we know her today. And sure, at this stage, let's face it, we wouldn't know her any other way. When she walked to school in Kilnaboy, a tale she does oft repeat, is that she had hot potatoes in her pockets and no shoes on her feet. Though Granny would declare this was total exaggeration, and having no shoes was a product of Finola's vivid imagination. In secondary school, she went to Ennis, wearing shoes, I should declare, and was an exemplary student in Coláiste Mhuire during her tenure there. Now, Finola knows her way around, which doesn't take much believing, for didn't she finish first in Ireland in geography, in the leaving? Onwards and upwards to Galway, she went to NUIG, and who was there at the time? A small lad called Michael D. Now, whatever happened to him? Has anyone got the word? He's living out near the Phoenix Park, last time anybody heard. So Finola qualified as a teacher, and a new life set out before her. But where would be her first post? Corofin? Kilfenora? Maybe a little further away, like Ballybunion or Buncrana. Incorrect on all counts. She was headed out to Ghana. Remember, this was back in the 1960s, when going to such a place was like being given the assignment to teach in outer space. So this was quite the challenge for her initial teaching brief, especially as she had to ward off the interest of a local tribal chief. He was so taken with her beauty, her delicate Irish skin. He expressed his fondest wish was for Finola to marry him. Now, if she thought Africa a challenge for a young teacher to be having, it prepared her for the next outpost, Cute Hill in County Cavan. Now, teachers, as we all well know, get their summers free, and it gives them a chance to do other things, whatever they may be. One summer, along with Kitty, Finola decided to head to the island of Jersey in the Channel Islands to spend the summer making beds. But if she thought this would be a doddle, she was in for quite the shock, for they were both worked to the bone almost round the clock. They were made to work their socks off without hardly any break, and they had to resort to slimming tablets to help keep them awake. Now, as to how they sourced the slimming tablets was somewhat of a mystery. The rumour has it that the source was a certain Garda Joe Connolly. Back then to the world of teaching, at the autumn renewal to teach business at the Tech, Ennis Vocational School. Though Finola was not a fan of it being known as the Tech, but I needed something to rhyme with it, so I used it. What the heck? So she moved from the vocational school, after a little while, Goody Gales School and Clore, August E. Numentor Ivoil. And there she remained Ivoil till the year 2004, before hanging up her teaching robes and heading out the door. But let us take a step back to Cootehill before we go too far, when a certain doctor entered her life, and he from Cunte on Clore. She saw him across a crowded room. She thought, he looks divine. Make no mistake, she thought to herself, this hunk, he shall be mine. But she settled for Mackin in the end and dated him instead, and in August 1973, the pair of them were wed. And their marriage got off to a flying start. Literally, I should report, for their wedding took place at the chapel beside Dublin Airport. They settled into their new home just outside Currafin in Mohtachio, overlooking lovely Loch Inchiquin. And they didn't hang around family-wise, for they were hardly in the door before Lachlan, their firstborn, duly arrived in 1974. After him came the three M's, Mahan, Morlin and Miriam, followed by Tiernan, and finally in 87, the baby Mackin Fionn. So you might imagine this idyllic family with Irish names so quaint. But an inside source informs me Finola needed the patience of a saint. While they might have been holy terrors every other minute, she pushed them to their potential while they pushed her to the limit. Now, sometimes her fallback strategy to counter what they were doing was the weapon of choice for all Irish mammies, the good old wooden spoon. But though there were many times that it might have been produced, the sight alone would calm things down, and it was never put to use. A good example of family chaos would be, at a single glance, the family holidays when most every year they would go to France. Now, getting a family of 8 on board was quite the undertaking and would leave lesser mortals than Finola bruised and badly shaken. On one occasion, they were speeding along the French motorways. The roof box suddenly loosened up and then just blew away. So the car was brought to a halt with a sudden thud, and Morlin and Miriam were deployed to go back and recover whatever they could. Now, when on the subject of driving, the case would seem to be that when it comes to the subject of motor cars, Finola has quite the history. It all began when she was driving first, and the Dublin visitors had come to stay. Finola, in her wisdom, would take the kids away for the day. It's still a mystery how she squeezed in so many of the little terrors who would probably have made it into the Guinness Book of Records. One time in Lahinch, she dropped the keys, but before she realised, the Atlantic had started rolling in and they were covered by the tide. And she had to arrange for lifts to bring her and the kids away and come back to Lahinch to try and find the keys the following day. As to the specific make of car, one has gone into folklore. It was her tendency to go for the legendary Renault 4. That make has quite unique ventilation, not many people know, that by lifting up the flooring, you could see the road below. The Renault had a life of its own and would cause the occasional thrill, such as taking off by itself and careering down Kilnaboy Hill, with Lachlan and Mahan in the back, but trying to decipher how come the Renault 4 can work without the need for a driver. The McNamara children have happy memories of Finola driving to Kilkee, playing ABBA and the Beatles while explaining the family history. Away from family matters, Finola has many passions. Chief amongst is her interest and her love of fashion, though memories are still vivid, and how anybody let her, of the banana yellow leather swing coat. Well, the less said of that, the better. As for her shoe collection, it's impossible to keep pace. She certainly puts Imelda Marcus in the halfpenny place. There was also one-off famous hairstyle that frankly was short-term back in the 1980s when Finola got a perm. And when she came back to the house, she went unrecognised. In fact, everyone thought Auntie Mary had come home was a big surprise. And then there is the environment where she was very much to the fore in the Burren Action Group and Saving Mullaghmore. Such was her prominent stance in her opposition. She came very close to spending one Christmas locked up in Limerick prison. Of course, being of Clancy stock, she inherited the traits such as not throwing anything away, including food that was out of date. Now, while her family might recoil in horror as they struggled to take a bite, Finola's stock response was, "Sure, it won't kill you." It's unfair. She's been right. Religion is another Clancy tradition that Finola did not let pass, and she'd agreed with Father Ted. There's a lot to be said for another mass. Just looking at her hobbies and interests, her passions and pastimes, the one question that keeps coming up, where does she get the time? There's the garden, for example. Her love for it still lingers, and she takes great pride in how it looks. She is a true green fingers. She's passionate about the less well off, And that passion doesn't stop. She volunteered once upon a time in Ennis's Oxfam shop. And though happy to be of service and she gave with all her will, there was one challenge that defeated her. She hated that bloody till. The outdoor life she clearly loves and remains very much in the loop each Tuesday when she heads out with the walking group. Though local sources tell us while they certainly do some walking, it's only cover for their favourite pastime, and that, of course, is talking. By all accounts, she's a great cook, and I've heard it tell from someone there is no challenge that is too great. She could make a meal out of an onion. Not only good at the cooking, but the baking too, moreover. Known for her bread and her savoury scones and her hard to beat pavlova. Now, with her depth of knowledge, she really is the biz. She is the woman that you want on your team at a table quiz. But the only thing to hold her back from making the best impression is the very real possibility that Finola mightn't hear the question. But possibly her greatest honour came at the age of 17, when news broke of a newborn child in Dublin had come upon the scene. A red-headed little bundle, and the family all did agree he was such a darling baby, as cute could be. The clamour to be chosen godmother was suddenly underway. In many ways, it could be described as the X factor of its day. And from the many candidates who cherished this mighty honour, joy was unconfined for Finola, and the role was cast upon her. Now, apart from family holidays, she has travelled far and wide. She could nearly make a living as being a tour guide. There was Mexico with Mary way back in the day. Trips to Egypt and Tunisia also came her way. She discovered her inner Julie Andrews when she did procure a place for herself in Austria on a Sound of Music tour. And the offspring being abroad has given her the excuse to travel over to see them, and once out there, cut loose. Visiting Miriam in Belgium, her passport went astray, and until it was located, she had to stay the few extra days. Finola is convinced that Miriam hid the thing, just causing the delay so that Finola would have no choice but to stay on for 4 more days. Sometimes while abroad, her communication skills were not the best, like the time visiting Moreland in Madrid. She went out to get the breakfast from the local deli and thought she'd give her Spanish-speaking skills a little welly. She returned some time later, and only God knows what she said, with no breakfast, but she did have 3 full ham pizzas instead. But the most standout trip abroad to be with family was when Lachlan was getting married over in Italy. Poor Finola slipped in the shower. Not sure if drink was taken, but she struggled on regardless, bruised and somewhat shaken. She enjoyed the celebrations immensely, so she did, despite the fact she was suffering with possibly broken ribs. And then this brings us back to family and the continuation with her 7 doting grandchildren, the upcoming generation. Hilary, Doireann and Caleb, Anna and Aveen, Roisin and then Megan make up the grandkids team. And of course, there are her brothers and her sisters who cannot be ignored, some of whom have very sadly gone to their reward. She looks forward to the sisters' meeting where they gather to take stock and squeeze an old mass or 2 in when they all meet up in Knock. So that's been your life to date. The laughter, the fun, the tears. A good title for this might be Around Finola in 80 Years. So Finola, hopefully you've enjoyed this ramble back through your active life, and that recounting it has not caused you any undue strife. So all that remains to say, on behalf of everyone, is to wish you the happiest birthday and many more to come.